Well, hello to you all once again, and thanks to all my loyal YouTube fans for returning to what is fast becoming known as the internet's best outlet for discussing and taking a look at vintage race bikes from the past. So thanks to you all, and welcome to Classic Dirt Bike TV. Now, we like to think here at Classic Dirt Bike TV that we supply the very best content with regards looking at all of these old racers from our past, and we're going to continue that theme once again here by taking a look at another iconic race bike from the Rob Hughes Classic Dirt Bike collection. Now, this is another fantastic CCM machine from Rob's collection, so without any further chit-chat from me, let's jump straight into the video and take a look at Rob's 1995 C25 CCM. Now, by the time that 1995 came around, the CCM factory at Shifnal Street in Bolton had been involved in motocross and off-road competition for nearly 25 years, and this featured Alan Clue's bike here was titled the C25 in recognition of the company's first 25 years of building some of the best four-stroke motocross bikes in the UK. Now, during 1995, CCM were in the process of developing these new C25 race bikes, and at the time they were experimenting with a brand new frame design, which hopefully, once all of the design parameters had been sorted out, would become the basis for their brand new bike in 1996. Now, it was the son of Alan Clues, Austin Clues, who led a team of engineers to try and improve the design of this frame to try and make it lighter and stronger, and also reduce the overall time it took them to manufacture the actual chassis. They also tried to increase the oil capacity that the frame could hold, and hopefully once all of these new upgrades were put in place, these would be implemented into the new 1996 bike the following year. Now, the new chassis had a single front down tube, and they say this was actually made from two pressings of metal rather than welding multiple pieces of tube and sheet metal together to form that now familiar diamond shaped frame section. But when the modifications were completed on the new chassis, the frame was then sent to the USA to be made into a full race bike for American motocross racing legend Donny Schmit. Now, when the upgraded frame arrived in the States, the entire machine was then built by Paul Atkinson and Austin Clues himself, and the finished machine was then given to Donny Schmit to do a full practice day on when he rode it at Monmouth Mountain in California. Now, Donny Schmit certainly gave this prototype machine a very good hammering around the track on that day, and it was soon discovered that the frame was showing signs of fatigue and stretching, and so the chassis was then sent back to the UK for inspection and upgrading. But basically, the main problem was that the area around the frame's headstock was beginning to open up, and unfortunately it didn't appear to be strong enough. But of course this was still just an experimental chassis, and that's what was involved in its development by doing things through experimentation and redesign. Although eventually the brand new design of the chassis was then all changed back to its original stock parameters, and Donny then took the bike to a World Championship win in the 1995 four-stroke championships. But of course, soon after Donny's triumphant win on the CCM, he suddenly passed away from leukemia, and we lost another one of the world's greatest off-road racers in 1996 at the age of just 29. Now the motor on this machine is of course an Austrian made 604cc Rotax engine with a single overhead camshaft and a 4-valve head. Now the cylinder head is of course a twin port configuration whereby you have twin exhaust ports as opposed to just a single exhaust port on many other race bikes. Now the cylinder, as I recall, had a 97mm bore and an 81mm stroke. Now the motor also sports a 5-speed gearbox, which is more than enough cogs to cope with that huge grunt that these 4-banger motors punch out. Now once again, a rubber-toothed belt drive was used to connect the crank to the camshaft and keep all of those motors' workings in sync. And as far as I'm aware, this was a very reliable system, and if you ever had any instances of belt breakages, normally on these big Rotax thumper motors the engine just stops, and it's usually just a case of retiming everything, fitting a brand new belt, and you're good to go. But in terms of their ruggedness and reliability, these 4-stroke Rotax motors were almost unbreakable. Now in this next shot here, it's quite hard to see due to it being tucked away in behind that big Rotax motor. There's quite a substantial Dell'Orto carburetor hidden there just in front of that black plastic airbox. Now, once again, as I just mentioned, although this is a single cylinder engine, it has a twin port exhaust cylinder head that has these 2 header pipes that run down the right hand side of the motor and into the single link pipe, which then tucks inside the frame and travels past the rear shock. And of course this eventually joins onto this big tailpipe at the rear. Now this system isn't of course your ordinary mild steel variety. This complete exhaust unit is made from high grade titanium. Now this is not only lighter than its equivalent steel or alloy counterpart. These titanium exhaust systems are very strong as well, and also they certainly look the part on this big thumper C25. Now at the front end of this Donny Schmit C25 we've got a very substantial pair of 50mm Italian made Marzocchi Magnum forks, and for 1995 these Marzoccis were excellent suspension systems, and that's the reason that these were used on many other off-road race bikes of the 1990s, because they had a very good reputation for their ruggedness and reliability. They also had quite decent scope for making adjustments to the rebound and damping, so they were quite tunable for a rider's specific riding style or different track conditions. And because these were very good suspension systems, that's what made them so popular with so many different manufacturers. Now at the bike's rear quarter we have a white power gas shock, and again this was an excellent suspension system on this bike, and it had this laid down configuration, and it was bolted directly onto the rear swing arm at the bottom and fixed to the frame at the top just underneath the engine's carburetor. But back in 1995 the front and rear suspension system on this C25 CCM was regarded as one of the top components on this Donny Schmit racer, and it was widely accepted as one of the best suspension systems of that 1990s period. Now, as I remember about these C25s from back in the day, they just had a simple box section swing arm, which was again a very strong part of the bike's rear suspension system. Now, naturally, because this was at 1995, the bike also sported modern style hydraulic disc brakes, and these were once again top quality Italian made Brembo brakes. Now the bike had a single cylinder piston caliper on the rear and a twin caliper unit on the front wheel, and both used the sliding guide pins to allow the caliper to float around the disc when you applied the brake. But these again were very good stoppers and did a decent job of slowing down that big 4-stroke thumper. Now once again, and I'm not entirely 100% sure on this particular fact, but I do recall that some of these C25s did used to have Spanish made Morad alloy wheels back in the day, and these items fitted onto this Donny Schmit bike certainly look like they're almost brand new, but to be fair, I expect that this entire bike's more than likely undergone a full refurb before it was placed back into Rob Hughes' collection. Now once more, and as you'd expect on one of these relatively modern motocrossers, a plastic fuel tank, and I'm sure that this particular fuel cell held about just over 2 gallons of gas, which was usually just enough to keep that 600cc Rotax engine fed with its fuel. But essentially all of the plastics on this bike were manufactured by Acerbis in Italy, who even in this modern day are still regarded as one of the top suppliers for all manner of motocross bike plastics. Now the seat once again on these C25s is of course a modern style component compared to say the older motocrossers of the past, which were pretty basic and functional. But these modern style seats do allow the rider to move his weight around on the bike, and of course allow him to basically get his weight almost on top of the fuel tank if he ever wanted the bike to make a steep sharp turn into a corner. But in the bike's controls department, a pair of 798 cross rubber grips are fitted, and as far as I'm aware, all of the other controls with regards the clutch and brake levers are top quality off the shelf motocross parts, although no decompressor lever fitted on this bike, which is a bit of a surprise, as some of these big single cylinder 4-stroke motors can certainly be quite hard to turn over to get them fired up, and a decompressor certainly helps in that kind of situation. But nevertheless, everything looks purposeful and to hand, and those racing bars, as far as I'm aware, are the originals from 1995. Now also fitted on this C25 CCM, it had a custom made plastic airbox with a foam filter inside. Now this filter of course could be removed quite easily for cleaning and servicing if and when required. But in terms of these C25 600s overall weight, they weren't too bad as 4-stroke bikes go, as I think the biggest addition to its overall mass was of course that big lump of a Rotax motor. But the overall dry weight of the bike I think was around the 250 pound mark, which was roughly about the same as the equivalent 4-banger Husaberg of its day. But although this particular CCM was essentially still a prototype chassis, and this was basically just a test bed to try out some design changes and other new parameters that CCM could possibly introduce into their new 1996 bike, but after the death of the great man Donny Schmit, the design changes and other planned upgrades for this bike were then shelved for the near future. And so this is a machine that takes pride of place among Rob Hughes' other collection of CCM racers, and knowing that the legendary Donny Schmit actually rode this fantastic looking bike just adds to the bike's history and its provenance as another iconic and legendary CCM racer from the Clues competition machines factory. But as I said, and summing up, this bike was indeed a big celebration of the first 25 years of the Clues dynasty, and of course more models and other innovations were still to follow in the years to come. Well, there you have it. I do hope you've enjoyed that quite brief look around Rob Hughes' fantastic looking C25 CCM, a bike of course that was ridden by motocross legend Donny Schmit. Now we will be featuring more CCM bikes from Rob Hughes' fantastic collection of vintage racers, so if you've not already subscribed to my channel, and I do hope you will consider doing that small thing, and that way of course you won't miss out on any future videos that I post here on my channel. Okay, coming up next on my channel we will be featuring this lovely Alf Hagen Yamaha that belongs to Lee Davis. Now this is a bike that we spotted at the Westmoreland County Showground event in 2021, so we'll be taking a look at Lee Davis's lovely Alf Hagen Yamaha in my next video posting. But until then, of course, everybody continue to be safe when you're out there riding those old vintage racers, and we'll all get together once again soon when we return to your #1 Classic Dirt Bike TV channel.